As far as the ECHR is concerned, we're very much of the view that it's a body that they say is separate from the European Union, but, you know, I could walk from my office in Strasbourg straight into the European Court of Human Rights. They're joined at the hip.
Seriously? The ECHR is entirely separate from the European Union, and Farage knows that. The ECHR is an international treaty of the Council of Europe, a separate international organisation focused on human rights, democracy and the rule of law. In contrast, the EU is a political and economic union with its own distinct legal framework. What Farage appears to be doing here is deliberately conflating the European Convention on Human Rights with the European Union. The ECHR and its European Court of Human Rights are part of a completely separate and different legal system to the EU.
The Channel crisis began with a trickle of dinghies in 2018. The numbers in 2018 and 19 were very small indeed. But I began to realise in early 2020 that virtually nobody that came via this route was being deported.
Well, perhaps this will help. Here is Home Secretary Yvette Cooper telling members of the Home Affairs Select Committee there is evidence the lack of a migrant return deal after Brexit is a factor for people making the dangerous channel crossing.
Home Secretary, 10 years ago we didn't have small boat crossings, but now they're one of the biggest challenges your department faces. What's changed in the interim is we don't have the Dublin system. There's no mechanism for the Home Office to send back people to European countries where they should be. So my question is, are you looking at ways to work with European countries to strengthen that?
There's a series of factors, I think, behind what's happened. We've seen this big increase in small boat crossings over the last... You go back to 2018 and it was barely a handful. And since then, an entire criminal industry has taken hold along our borders. We obviously always said that we would like to see a replacement for the Dublin scheme, and to recognise the impact of that. And it is something that there is evidence of people who arrive in the UK raising that as being a factor for them.
Would you see a return to Dublin as an option for the Home Office? Is it something you're pursuing, given when we had it before we didn't have small boat crossings?
So we have always said that we would like to see those sorts of arrangements and the replacement for that kind of arrangement.
Ms Cooper made the remarks after being questioned by Labour MP Chris Murray about the EU's Dublin scheme, which gives member states the right to return migrants to European countries where they have previously made an asylum claim. The UK had such an arrangement with the EU until December 31st, 2020, when the Brexit transition period came to an end. The Home Secretary's comments came after a leaked recording was obtained by Sky News, in which Tory Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp, who back in 2020 was the Immigration Minister, appears to suggest they believed when it came to asylum, there were flaws in the deal we had at the point we left the European Union.
Now, because we're out of the European Union now, we are out of the Dublin III regulations, and so we can't any longer rely on sending people back to the place where they first claimed asylum. When we did check it out, just before we exited the EU transitional arrangements on December the 31st, 2020, we did run some checks and found that about half the people crossing the Channel had claimed asylum previously elsewhere in Europe, in Germany, France, Italy, Spain, somewhere like that, and therefore could have been returned. But now we're out of Dublin, we can't do that, and that's why we need to have somewhere like Rwanda that we can send these people to as a deterrent.
Former Conservative Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron has also suggested Britain can no longer return Channel migrants to France because of Brexit.
I'm someone who says we have a problem with illegal migration. You cannot have a situation where boat after boat crosses the Channel, leaving a perfectly safe country, France, and coming to another perfectly safe country, Britain. You just can't have that. And so you have to be creative and inventive, and that's what the Rwanda policy is.
And hand on heart, this had come up when you were PM, would you have gone for this policy?
Well, we'd had a totally different situation because we had a situation where you could return people directly to France. Now, I'd love that situation to be the case again. That's the most sensible thing. People land on a beach in Kent, you take them straight back to France, you therefore break the model of the people's smugglers.
So shouldn't you be trying to get that?
Well, that's not available at the moment. It's simply not possible
because
at the moment.
Brexit?
Well, because of the situation we're in, because of the attitude of others and all the rest of it. It's not available at the moment.
And all of this chimes with a 2023 study by Durham University, which found the primary factor in the skyrocketing number of small boat crossings was the former Conservative government's decision to leave the European Union without a returns agreement in place. Here are some of the report's key findings. The primary factor behind small boat crossings is the UK's lacking a returns agreement with the EU. The government never assessed the impact of the consequences for leaving the EU without a returns agreement to replace the Dublin regulation and was caught by surprise. The UK did not need to leave this agreement in leaving the EU. Non-EU members have returns agreements with the EU. The lack of a returns agreement fueled an increase in crossings. A key factor is the withdrawal from a returns policy with the EU in 2020. Since 2016, the government has been warned repeatedly about the consequences of leaving the EU without a returns policy in place, including that it would fuel a large increase in irregular migration. It was asked several times to offer an assessment of the consequences, but it declined. The failure to acknowledge its past policy failure has impacted on its ability to fix it. After repeatedly denying the need to make any assessment of its oven-ready deal, the government appears unable to acknowledge that its failure to agree a returns agreement in this deal would have the consequences it has. This is because to address this failing is to recognise its earlier error, which may have political costs. So Brexit, championed by Farage, has been a significant factor in creating this mess. Why are UK news shows not pointing that out?
We have to leave the ECHR, no ifs, no buts. We have to repeal the Human Rights Act of 1998. We will, for a 5-year period, disapply the 1951 Refugee Convention and any other barriers.
Prison camps, leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, scrapping the Human Rights Act and quitting the Refugee Convention and the UN Convention Against Torture. Is that really the kind of country we want to be? And I'll repeat this every day. The European Convention on Human Rights protects our right to a fair trial, freedom of assembly and expression, the right to participate in free elections, freedom of religion, freedom from discrimination, the right to privacy, freedom from torture and degrading treatment. And if all that's not enough for you, leaving the ECHR could result in the UK's trade deal with the EU being terminated because the convention is written into the 2020 Trade and Cooperation Agreement. And leaving the ECHR would also breach the Good Friday Agreement, which requires that the convention be directly enforceable in Northern Ireland. Farage's plan would see us joining Russia and Belarus as the only European countries outside of the ECHR. It's completely insane. And it would also be a devastating blow to the UK's reputation within Europe and beyond as a country that accepted basic human rights obligations.
We will leave the ECHR, but that is nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough to get this job done. We must also repeal, not disapply, but repeal the Human Rights Act and replace it with a British Bill of Rights.
Well, that may sound great in principle, but it presupposes you can actually trust the party suggesting it with your human rights in the first place. Nigel Farage and Reform have consistently voted against the UK's Employment Rights Bill, which introduces key worker protections like statutory sick pay from day one and a ban on zero-hours contracts. Is that a party you would want to trust with your human rights? And remember this, the ECHR has protected British people from abuses of power by its own government.